What if I told you that 9 ordinary men on skis quietly changed the entire course of human history on a freezing February night in 1943? No air support, no tanks, no army behind them. Just 9 men, a ravine the Germans thought was impossible to cross, and explosives small enough to fit inside a backpack. And what they destroyed that night may have saved every single city that Hitler had quietly marked for nuclear annihilation. Stay with me, because the story you are about to hear is one of the most important true stories of World War II that almost nobody knows. Section 1. The race nobody knew was happening in 1938. German physicists made a discovery so terrifying that the scientists who understood it could barely sleep
Watch
at
the
night.
levels closely.
They discovered nuclear
Increase the
fission.
neutron flux. Now.
Splitting a single atom releases an almost incomprehensible amount of energy. And German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann had just proven it was not just possible, but repeatable, controllable, weaponizable. Hitler's scientists immediately understood what this meant. A bomb powered by nuclear fission would not just destroy a building, it would not just level a city block. It would erase an entire city in a single blinding flash. And Germany was already working on building one. Then a single location lights up in occupied Norway. But to build a nuclear reactor, to take that first critical step toward an atomic bomb, Germany needed one specific ingredient that almost nobody outside a handful of laboratories had ever heard of. Heavy water. Not regular water. Heavy water. Water in which the normal hydrogen atoms are replaced by a heavier form called deuterium. In a nuclear reactor, heavy water acts as what scientists call a moderator, slowing down neutrons just enough to sustain the chain reaction that makes nuclear weapons possible. And in all of occupied Europe, there was only one place producing heavy water in meaningful quantities. A plant clinging to the side of a frozen cliff in the remote mountains of Telemark, Norway. It was called Vemork, and it was about to become the most important building in the world. Section 2. The first attempt that ended in blood. By 1942, British intelligence knew exactly what the Germans were doing with the heavy water at Vemork. They knew the race was on. And they knew that if Germany reached the finish line first, the consequences would be unthinkable. So they planned a mission. Operation Freshman. 34 British engineering soldiers loaded into 2 military gliders and flew through a winter storm toward Norway. Here is where the story turns painful. Both gliders crashed in the Norwegian mountains. Those who survived the crashes were not rescued. They were captured by the Gestapo, interrogated, tortured, and executed under Hitler's standing commando order, which stated that any Allied commando captured behind enemy lines was to be killed immediately without trial. 34 men went in. 0 came home. The plant at Vemork was still standing. The heavy water was still flowing, and Hitler's nuclear program was still very much alive. But the mission was not over. Because waiting on that frozen plateau above the plant, living in a cabin in the brutal Norwegian winter, surviving on whatever they could find, was a small team of Norwegian agents, codenamed Grouse, who had been there for months preparing for the British soldiers who never arrived. They had one question for London. What now? Section 3. The 6 who would change everything. On February 16th, 1943, London's answer arrived from the sky. 6 Norwegian commandos of the Special Operations Executives Norwegian Independent Company parachuted onto the Hardanger Plateau at midnight amid a snowstorm. They were led by a 23-year-old second lieutenant named Joachim Runneberg, 23 years old. Before they jumped, their commanding officer, Colonel Leif Tronstad, gathered them and said something that none of them ever forgot. He said, "I cannot tell you why this mission is so important, But if you succeed, it will live in Norway's memory for 100 years. He could not tell them about atomic bombs. He could not explain heavy water or nuclear fission. He simply handed each man a suicide capsule and told them that if they were captured, they had two choices: use the capsule or be tortured by the Gestapo until they gave up every secret they carried. They jumped anyway. They landed miles from the target zone. A violent storm immediately buried their equipment in snow. They spent a week skiing through whiteout conditions searching for the grouse team. When they finally found each other, both groups were exhausted, half-starved, and operating deep inside enemy territory with no margin for error. They had one chance. They all knew it. Section 4. The crossing, they said, was impossible. On February 27, 1943, at 8 o'clock in the evening, the combined 9-man team began their approach to the Vemork plant. The plant sat on top of a steep hillside surrounded by a ravine 660 feet deep that acted like a natural moat. The Germans had studied the terrain and concluded that the only way in was across a single suspension bridge 246 feet long. That bridge was guarded, heavily, with searchlights, armed sentries, and minefields beyond it. The Germans were so certain the ravine was impassable that they had not even bothered to guard the other side. That was their fatal mistake. The 9 men descended into the ravine in complete darkness, slipping on ice, grabbing at frozen rock faces to stop themselves falling, crossing the icy Mana River at the bottom on foot, and then climbing the cliff on the other side, 500 feet of frozen rock in the middle of a Norwegian winter night. Local people said it was impossible to climb. The Germans believed it was impossible. 9 half-frozen Norwegian Commandos did it anyway. Section 5, inside the plant. At the top of the cliff, they found a railway line that led directly into the plant. One by one, they crept past sentries. A Norwegian worker inside the facility had smuggled out detailed maps months earlier through the resistance network. They knew exactly where to go. Down, to the basement, to the heavy water production room. 2 men slipped inside through a cable tunnel barely wide enough for a human body. The rest held defensive positions outside. Inside the production room, working as fast and as silently as their frozen hands would allow, they placed explosive charges directly on the most critical pieces of heavy water equipment. They set the fuses, they got out, and then they ran. At 1 in the morning, the explosives detonated. The sound rolled across the frozen valley and echoed off the mountains. German guards scrambled, alarms screamed, searchlights swung wildly across the snow, but they were already gone. Not a single shot had been fired. Not a single life was taken. 9 men had walked into one of the most heavily guarded industrial facilities in occupied Europe and walked back out again, and in the basement behind them, over 1,000 gallons of heavy water that had taken months to produce lay destroyed and draining into the floor. Section 6, the escape and the final blow. Some of the 9 skied nearly 400 kilometers to neutral Sweden in brutal winter conditions to escape. Others stayed in Norway to continue resistance work. The Germans repaired Vemork within months. American bombers then struck the plant in November 1943. And when the Germans finally decided to move their remaining heavy water supply to Germany by rail and then by ferry across Lake Tinnsjø, one of the Gunnerside saboteurs who had stayed in Norway was waiting. Knut Haukelid planted explosives on the ferry SF Hydro. On February 20th, 1944, the ferry sank to the bottom of the lake. The last significant supply of German heavy water went with it. The Nazi nuclear program never recovered. At the end of the war, Allied investigators discovered a second heavy water plant in Bavaria. It had produced nearly enough heavy water for a single atomic reactor, but not enough for a weapon and not in time to matter. Joachim Runneberg, the 23-year-old who led Operation Gunnerside, lived to be 99 years old. He passed away in 2018. When journalists asked him in his final years whether he understood at the time what they had truly done that night, he always gave the same quiet answer. He said, "The first time I heard about atom bombs and heavy water was after the Americans dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Only then did I understand what we had stopped. 9 men on skis, 1 frozen cliff, 1 basement, 1 chance. They took it. And somewhere in every city that was never vaporized by a Nazi atomic bomb, in every family that survived, in every life that continued after 1945, the echo of that single explosion in a Norwegian basement is still quietly present. They had one chance to stop Hitler's atom bomb, and they took it. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more untold military history that changed the world. Comment below. Did you like this story? Let us keep the memory of these heroes alive. Thank you so much for your support. God bless.